From Oscar Steakhouse, inside the Plaza Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, you're on the corner of Main Street. Welcome to the only podcast produced by and recorded in a Las Vegas hotel casino. From gaming to dining to entertainment to sports to Vegas history, this is the place to be for the inside scoop, because this is the place to be downtown. Now, here's Plaza CEO Jonathan Jossel.
Hey, good to be back. Nice to see you, Gary.
How are you?
Nice to see you, Gare Bear, I should say. Can't call you Gary, I'm not used to that. Doing great. How are you doing?
Good. The weather's starting to cool down, but everything here is starting to heat up. We're getting ready. We just left F1, and we're getting into the rodeo.
How long were you practicing that line? Things are cooling down, but we're heating up.
You know what? I just walked. I was looking outside. I got a little cold, and
you wrote that down, didn't you, to prepare for this? Yeah, it is. Rodeo season is upon us. Can't wait. As we're listening to this podcast, we should be a week out from the NFR, and we just finished a couple of weeks ago the Las Vegas Days, which will next year and in future years be called Eldorado. We've done a deal with the city to rebrand it as Eldorado, which is much better because it's a great brand, much cooler brand, and we'll tie into that event. Great.
Is this the first time you're announcing that publicly?
Yeah, well, it's not that big of a deal, but yeah, sure. I think it is. Yeah, it's public now. If it wasn't, I don't know, when we were supposed to announce it, PR might say, why'd you not tell them about it? But yeah, we're going to call it Eldorado. The city got the name from the Elks, and now we can use it for the next 3 years, as long as Eldorado or the event itself is taking place downtown, and we'll be on the Plaza land.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yep.
And our guest today, Jeremy Aguero, is going to be joining us. We recorded this episode about a week and a half ago.
Yeah, right.
Before
You're right.
F1 got started.
Good point.
But you had attended the F1, right?
So what we did is we released an excerpt from this episode the day of F1, basically, and a few people were a little taken by my tone and my reaction. I was not emotional. I was just being honest. It was bad for our business. We weren't having a good time business-wise. And everyone I talked to in downtown or other places had shared the same experience. It wasn't good for business for them. But that said, at the race, it was unbelievable. The race itself was a spectacle. It was seen all over the world. The viewership was very good from what I heard. People in England and other places were like, wow, this race looks great. At the race, it was, from what I'm not a huge F1 fan, but I was told it was a very exciting race, one of the more exciting races of the year. And it seemed like the drivers came around. They were saying some bad things. It seemed like as an event, it was a spectacle, which I think we knew it would be. And I even said on the episode, this is going to be a spectacle. But obviously, seeing it in the flesh and the way that the hospitality was great looking people. The truth was, it wasn't an inconvenience to get in and out of the strip. So, I mean, in many ways, it was a huge success from an event. But let's just be honest, it wasn't great for our business. And I think the goal now is to work with the relevant bodies to say, how do we improve this for everyone? It can't just be good for the very, very high end. You see, if you call it a citywide event, it needs to benefit the city. The citywide events that we have benefit the whole city. This can't just benefit the 4 high-end casinos, because even some of the people on the strip in the middle of the strip did not report good numbers, or good experience with it. So, we don't need to say, no one needs to be critical of it, because at the end of the day, this event's here to stay. We want it to be successful. And when I was having the conversation with Jeremy or saying some of the things maybe on Twitter, I was perhaps a little more outspoken than I needed to be, because the truth is it's a first-time event and it needs to do well, and hopefully it will.
Anything from the event while you were there that you would have thought that there was room for improvement?
The only thing I would say is, it's hard to watch the cars at that speed going by. They're flying by so fast. So I was on the Bellagio fountains. I was at the hospitality deck, and then there was a sky deck there that was put on by Marquee Nightclub, which was unbelievable. You had the fountains going. At one point, you had the fireworks. You had the cars going by, the food. So for me, it was a real spectacle. The only thing they missed there was not having more screens outside. Because you had to go inside to see the screens, and you kind of need the screens to see where everyone is in position and some of the detailed things happening as the cars fly by. You're not getting a great experience with that. But no, they did a good job. I think the goal should be to build this event the right way, right pricing, get everyone behind it, maybe bring the cars downtown one of the days, help find a way to make the rest of the city feel included, and then blow this thing up into what it should have been, which was a huge citywide event.
Okay. Well, let's speak with Jeremy and get in depth into the conversation. Today we're being joined by the principal analyst for the company Applied Analyst, and has worked for some of the largest companies in Las Vegas, such as Boyd Gaming, Stations Casinos, UFC, City of Henderson, Clark County. Today we're welcoming Jeremy Aguero on the corner of Main Street. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Nice to see you, Jeremy. Good to be with you here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for taking the time. I know you could be anywhere in the world, so it's probably a busy weekend for you coming up. But, this podcast was started a couple of years ago. Thank you, Rich, for making noise already. You've been in here 10 seconds and you're already making noise.
All
No,
right.
no, don't cut that. Leave that. And this podcast really is trying to give people, our listeners, an insight into Vegas that they wouldn't otherwise get from the industry, whether it's history, industry, business. And frankly, you tick all the boxes. And so when I was with you the other day in a meeting, it made me think we need to get you on our podcast because some of the insight and backstory you can share about whether it's events or development or Vegas generally is probably you're the only person or the best person in the world to tell that story. So thank you for sharing this mic with us.
Yeah, look, I'm 100% honored to be here. There's nowhere I'd rather be. Look forward to jumping into it. It's kind of fun to talk about our community and how we've got to where we are and really where we're headed as a community. Pretty exciting times.
Perfect.
And you are wearing a Grand Prix shirt today, which is nice of you. Thank you. I'm being honest about it on Twitter. It's our worst weekend of the year, and Instagram. It's our lowest occupancy of the year. Other casino developers I've talked to have said it's their lowest occupancy of the year. I'm sure on the Strip it's going to be a spectacle. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to go to it. But in terms of business for us downtown, it has not been good for us.
Yeah, there's an interesting challenge that's set up by opportunities like this, and I think we face it with others, and we will continue to face it. And we have to find a way to adapt to it as a community. And that is, my expectation is that Formula One will have about 140,000 people in town for that event.
Really?
Right.
Over the 3 days or at one per day?
No, that's over that is the number of people coming in. Some will go to all 4 days of the event, including the opening ceremonies, all the way to the Saturday main event. Others will come in and out. And that includes, not only people that are attending, obviously multiple attendees for a single ticket, the way that it has it, but also people that are just coming in to actually operate the event, those type of things. The town is full at about 315,000 people overall. And so when you create this dynamic between one event that has about 140,000 people plus or minus in the community, right, what happens with the other 160,000, the occupancy associated with that? And we've seen some asymmetry there. And I don't think we want to steer away from major events like, Formula One or the Super Bowl or NCAA championships or anything along those lines, but we have to be mindful that the number of people that are here, that we're the only community in the United States that has 150,000 hotel rooms or 250,000 leisure and hospitality employees. That's a dynamic that other communities don't have to deal with.
That is a great point that you bring up. So I'm talking to our guests in the action, in the live, and as to be transparent, as we're recording this, F1 hasn't happened. As you're listening to this, F1's happened. Maybe it's been a great success, but it will be a great success. It's going to be a spectacle on TV. Everyone around the world's going to watch this. Vegas is going to look unbelievable from up in the air when you're overseeing this race. Although I did see, again, as of today, Max Verstappen, probably the most famous F1 driver, critiquing the course and Vegas as a whole, which isn't a good look for F1 in Vegas. But what you bring up is a good point because, yes, 140,000 people coming for the race, if that's right, sounds like a lot of people, but it for Vegas, it's just not. And the problem is when I talk to our customers and people that normally come this time of year, what I've heard from a lot of them is, I'm staying away. I'm staying away for this week. I don't want to be there. I'll come when the roads are open. I'll come when airfare's normal. I'll come when rates are more normal. You'll probably see rates starting to drop, but they're still selling tickets as of today. And I don't know, I could be wrong on this, but I don't know that any hotel is sold out as of now that I've seen. So they probably have high rates still, but I did hear from one very prominent hotel, I'm not saying where, that their occupancy is low enough that they're giving free rooms to their employees to help them get in and out of the hotel. And they're one of the ones that you would think, okay, they should definitely be sold out.
Look, there's a lot of dynamics here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's the dynamics of the pricing of Las Vegas and how we position it. I think, there's also media dynamics. There's also disruptive dynamics, right? I mean, what does it mean to have the Las Vegas Strip disrupted for the amount of time that it has been? And then there are implications associated with that for employees, for people that live here, as well as for events. I believe that this community needs to have a broader conversation about the infrastructure of opportunity or the infrastructure necessary to capitalize on opportunities, right? We have this conversation about, how many police officers are available or what's going to be open and what's not. We ought to be able to capitalize on all of these things without allowing the limitations of infrastructure to be the reason we don't do something. I mean, do we really, even if Formula One is imperfectly deployed here this go around. Even if that happens, and I don't like some of the comments that you've read. Do we really want it to happen somewhere else? Do we want to find a way to make it work here? Or are there certain events that we just say, hey, they just can't work here in Southern Nevada? I don't believe we're anywhere near that. We want the Super Bowl. I think we want Formula One. I think we want the NBA Cup, the mid-season tournament. I think we want those type of things here because, again, to get 40 million visitors to come to Las Vegas, we need a lot of them to show up.
Yeah, F1 is a very unique animal. I should know this, but are you involved in it?
Yes.
You're involved in F1?
Yeah, we did work
in a more
early
official
on.
capacity?
Oh, we did work early on
Okay.
for Formula One, looking at the economic implications associated with the race. We did work for them in Miami around the race and what happened there. And then we've done some preliminary estimates based on what they anticipated to be able to do here.
And is it a 10-year deal for Vegas?
Right now it's a 3-year deal.
Okay, I stand correct because a guest was telling me it's only a 3-year deal, and I thought it was a 10-year deal, but it's just a 3-year deal.
Right now it's a 3-year deal.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I'm with you. I hope it turns out to be a huge success, and they got to find a way to incorporate other areas as well, like South Point, downtown. We all need something from it. If it's going to kill the normal customer from coming here or our regular customer from coming here, you've got to find a way to help the other people then benefit from the scale of this event.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's a citywide event.
Right.
It should have a citywide benefit.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? And if, look, there's a lot of growing pains in doing something like this. It's not going to be perfect. And, obviously there's been a lot of conversation about that. But we ought to find a way to embrace our prosperity as a community. And right now, there's a lot of that not happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of the angst that goes around. And I don't want to minimize that or discount it in any way. I don't want you to have a low occupancy weekend or the lowest occupancy weekend. And I don't want, people to have a difficult time getting in and out of the workforce. Obviously, from an economic standpoint, there's no benefit associated with
Correct.
that.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And this is, to be fair to Formula One, even as long as it's been around in so many places it's gone around the world, this is new. This is maybe like Monaco, but not really. It's not like the other two races in America on closed courses or a made-up course. It's through city streets. It's nothing like it was back in the 80s in the parking lot at Caesar's Palace. You're making up a lot of stuff.
First of all, I think you're 100% correct. And I think there's another nuance associated with that. And that is that Formula One as an organization has promoters in every other market, right? This is the first time Formula One itself has ever put on a race. And so, from that perspective, there's also some learning curve that goes here. It's new for us. It's new for them. And like you said, the geography associated with it is like Singapore or like Monaco, where it's a street race. And that is going to create a phenomenon from that standpoint in terms of the visualization that we get from that. And I hope other drivers feel like it is a spectacular and a cool thing to be involved with. But, there's a lot of new here.
I know Gary has an agenda, but I'll just say one more thing on F1, and then we can jump to Gary's agenda.
No.
But the idea, one, I think it doesn't help them that the F1 season, if you're an F1 fan, has already been decided. There's already a champion, the result's done. So that probably doesn't help from the spectacle perspective in terms of is it a competitive, exciting race once there's already a winner of the season. But that's more of a technical thing. I think the bigger issue for me, in talking to everyone was so excited 16 months ago when they announced this thing that it was going to be the biggest, best race. And I think in true Vegas style, we wanted it to be the biggest and best. What we probably did was overprice it and just priced out the average customer as a city. And whether it's the ticket sales, whether it's the airfare, whether it's the hotels, this is a very cost prohibitive event to attend at this point. And as a city, maybe we should have gone the other way and said, let's get everyone here, pack it, make it the most exciting F1 race in the history of the world. And then yield rates up based on demand. But instead, we just went straight to the top, and everyone was focused on the $1 million package. And yeah, sure, there's going to be all the billionaires are coming, right? No doubt about it. But that's the 100. Unfortunately, there's not 300,000 of them. There's only a handful, and you're going to get the very wealthy and affluent people coming, but you're not getting the mass middle America crowd that we need to fill the city on a regular basis.
And I think this is a conversation that our community is going to have. This is not the only time, right? We've run into college football games that are hosted around New Year's Eve. And when they're hosted around New Year's Eve, does prices go up for hotel rooms? As prices go up for airfare? It makes it difficult to have that work. There is a delicate balance there that we need to be better at as a community in terms of determining. Look, no one wants to leave money on the table. That's
right.
clear. And I'm not going to substitute my judgment for the judgment of folks that operate like you, that operate hotels and casinos. They know their business well. I get that. The opposite side of that is coming together and finding ways so we don't have the imbalance you just talked about, I think is critical.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that they're expecting about 140,000 people to attend the F1 event. Has that always been the benchmark of what we wanted even 16 months ago when this was announced?
No, the numbers were a little higher 16 months ago. And let me be clear, that's not just the people that are attending the event.
No, that's
right?
everybody involved.
That's everybody involved, from the operations of Formula One to media to everyone that sort of circulates around a race.
Sponsors, employees,
That's
security.
Exactly.
It's huge.
Yeah, all of those type of things. I mean, they have some people that, a lot of people that travel with those teams and everything that goes into that. So, when we look at that number, that was about the expectation. It's been a little higher. It's been a little lower in other estimates. But, look, that's the starting point, and we need to see how it plays out and then evaluate it going forward.
Perfect. How do you think year 2, year 3 is going to go? Just based on what you've seen so far. I know we're 2 days before the race, but
It's super hard to tell.
Yeah.
Look, I think we have to determine how. I think the onus is on Formula One and, frankly, on this community to be able to deliver. Our fates are kind of tied in some ways, right? It's not just about Formula One putting on a great race. It is the city being a great host for that race, right? I mean, I've heard all kinds of things about Uber drivers aren't going to show up and employees aren't going to show up to work and all those type of things. And in all honesty, none of that has been true, right? I mean, Uber drivers have come out. Employees are showing up and going to work, right? I mean, the articles that have been written and thoughtfully done about the fact that room rates are falling. Well, hey, wait a second. The room rates went, at least in the articles that I'm reading, from $5,000 a night to $2,500 a night to $1,500 a night to the most recent one, $800 a night. And it's like a calamity that these things are taking place, when in reality, at least the analysis that we did expected 2.5 to 4x, 2.5 to 4 times, I should say, the room rate that we would traditionally get during the weekend associated with a Formula One race, which took it up to $401 in terms of the visitor spend on lodging, right? So I'm not worried about the estimates sort of being there. I'm worried about, Jonathan talked about, in terms of this asymmetry relative to that. And, the secondary market for the tickets, there's a lot of things being written around that. 14% of the people that come to Las Vegas on any given weekend make the decision to come within 7 days of making the trip. This has been true for a very long time. The fact that there's an active secondary market exists for every major event that we have in Southern Nevada. Now, exactly how that plays out, how many are locals versus people coming in from out of town, whether there's a regional trend, whether we get the reach into the international market that was talked about before, I think these are all really important dynamics that will play into your question about how well things perform in the coming year. I don't know the answers to those questions.
Right.
I would rather Las Vegas be able to figure out how to have Formula One, because I think the combination of their brand and our brand has value to this community.
And by the way, and I said this from the beginning, this was the best weekend to do it. We're normally slower anyway, right? But not this slow. So it's a question of finding out how to make this event successful within the. And I hope it stays and is figured out, as opposed to, like you said, lose the event, because I think it's good long term. They just got to figure out how to benefit everyone.
You bet. I mean, I'm sorry.
So what makes you qualified to opine on all this stuff? Where are you from, and what is applied analysis?
Yeah, we started this episode.
How do people know that they're listening to a genius here that knows everything about hospitality in Vegas?
I am far from a genius, but I'll give you a little bit about my background. Fourth generation from Southern Nevada, so this is the community that I know. My family moved here in 1905. My great-great-grandfather moved here to help with surveying in the mountains, some of those type of things. My father's side of the family immigrated from Cuba in the late 1950s and moved here in the early 1960s. 60s. So my family has a long history here. I had a unique course of study as an undergraduate at UNLV because I've never left this community. I'm proud of that. Did some work with a company called Coopers & Lybrand that is now PricewaterhouseCoopers as part of the consolidation happened there, and did economic and fiscal impact analysis for them, and have done that after starting applied analysis after leaving there for about 25 years. Had the opportunity to, I think, work on I don't know, a lot of economic and fiscal impacts for major projects that we've had in the community. Back in 2001, Governor Gwynn asked me to help him with the Governor's Task Force on Tax Policy. And right before that, I worked for for UNLV in studying the economic, fiscal, and social implications associated with casino-based gaming for the Federal Gaming Impact Study Commission. Subsequently worked for 5 governors, worked on the Raiders deal, the A's deal, worked on the commerce tax deal. I've had the opportunity to work for tremendous clients, from the LVCVA to NV Energy to...
And was this all through applied analysis?
All of it.
So did you found applied analysis?
Yes, I founded applied analysis right out of school, but I have a business partner that's been with me since 2020. We have a co-CEO model, and there is no way it would be where it is today without him. But long story short, I've built a career around helping other people do whatever they're going to do better, whether that's in the public sector or the private sector. And we feel like we've done some good work.
So I've known you probably 12 years, but did not realize you were born and raised in Vegas and never left. You went to the William Boyd School of Law.
I did.
And what law school teaches you how to prepare for this? What you ended up doing?
I wish it was, well, number one, it has, but back when I was an undergraduate, there was a gentleman that was, I think he started the International Gaming Institute. His name was Dr. Shannon Bybee. I had taken a couple of classes. He asked me to come up and talk to him about the classes that I would take. We struck up a friendship, and he had me take a special course of study under his direction. Shannon passed away a while ago now, and before he passed away, he made me promise him I would go to law school. And so I did, on a promise. I never intended to practice law, but he felt like it would help round me out as an analyst, and it has. Look, I drafted the legislation around the commerce tax. I drafted the legislation around the Raiders deal, right? That skill set of being able to understand and read and work with legislators on legislation. And I should say, it is the Legislative Counsel Bureau that ultimately drafts everything, but being able to have a skeleton to bring those type of things forward and be able to perfect them as we go forward has been really important. And now, not only are we working on things like, the A's potentially coming to Las Vegas, but, in the last legislative session, we also drafted legislation around $100 million for a homeless prevention and assistance facility, and that's something I'm real proud of.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, there's a lot of things we want to talk about there, but
Sure.
Just so you know, Gary, interesting story. We met many, many years ago, and a couple of years ago, I asked Jeremy about maybe doing a study for our vacant 10 acres in downtown. Mm-hmm. And he very intelligently said, look, I can give you a whole proposal on what the highest and best uses for the land. And you may not remember this, but he said, long story short, I'm going to come to the same conclusion, which is you should wait, because downtown's changing dramatically and the highest and best use is going to evolve over the next 10 years. And this was probably 6-7 years ago, maybe a little less, but he was spot on. As you look at what's happened in the last 6-7 years downtown, everything has changed around us, from Greyhound leaving to the 800 new apartments to the west, to Circa to the east. And when you look at the Main Street development of the Arts District, East Fremont, it's a totally different market now. And as we look at our plans for there, you were spot on in terms of saying wait. And so you are a genius. Thank you for
Not a genius.
What do you think about downtown? What do you think about what's happening?
I'm super bullish on downtown. I think it's going to continue to evolve. I really like some of the numbers that we're seeing in terms of visitor volume growth. I'm a little concerned about the softness that we've seen over the past couple of months in the gaming revenue numbers, but I think that's akin really to the slowing that we're seeing at the bottom and sort of low end of the consumer spectrum as a result of the slowing of the national economy. And I'm not here to suggest the national economy is overall slowing. We've actually seen an uptick relative to that, but there's a level of consumer spending that's been taking place, as you know, for the last 24 months that's really benefited this community and benefited downtown. But I like the amenities that are being programmed in. I think that they are differentiating it. I think that really from the Fremont Street experience to the the Mob Museum to Circa being constructed down here, the additional investment is creating a reason for folks to come down and see Las Vegas and see the downtown area. And frankly, I think it's got a following in and of itself that's really developing it. And the combination of that and then some of the special events are not only drawing visitors down here that I think weren't coming before, but are also drawing more residents down to the downtown area. You know, I love the development of the arts district and what it really means to create a new amenity, a deeper fabric to the community, and I think it's grabbing hold. I think sustainability is going to be really important, and the number one issue I'm concerned about in our community is complacency, and so I think the diligence to making sure that we keep the momentum going is going to be critical.
So what do you think downtown is missing?
Well, look, I don't think it's one thing, right? I think that you could talk a number of things because I don't think downtown is one thing here either. If we're talking about sort of the visitor component associated with it, I think it's just time and continued reinvestment. I think the more special events that are going to draw people to downtown are going to be critically important to it overall. If you're going to talk about downtown a little broader than that, I think you've got to have more residential downtown. Yes. I think that really is a game changer for us overall. I think some of the assets like the Smith Center are give people additional reasons to come to the area. But I think you need more people living down here. And then I think there's other qualitative elements. I think we have got to be more aggressive relative to safety overall, and that guest experience. It is one thing to have a brand, either Las Vegas or downtown. It is another thing to deliver on that brand. And if we don't, in terms of connectivity, parking, safety, those type of things, amenity, quality of restaurants, delivering on what the promise is, I think is what Las Vegas has to do overall, but is critically important for downtown as well.
I wanted to touch on something you mentioned, but we've been hearing since COVID, there's pent-up demand, there's stimulus money, it's a fake market, and sure, there was some record spending. But there's a debate, right? We've been hearing for 2 years there's a recession coming, it's going to slow down, you get ready for it, and frankly, it hasn't materialized. Some might say there has been a recession because it's slowed down somewhat, but it isn't necessarily. You've still seen record numbers on the Strip, downtown. All the people reporting as of this quarter are still saying great numbers. How much do you think, whether it's inflation from gas prices, consumer debt, impacts the consumer versus the debate, which is, look, Vegas is selling something that no one else in the world is selling, which is fun. And if you're selling fun, you're always going to be in demand no matter what goes on around the world.
Yeah. Look, I think it's more an and than an or. Okay. Right? There's no doubt that Las Vegas has something special, and we're continuing to demonstrate that every single weekend. I mean, just look at what's coming up, right? Formula One, going into NBA, going into the National Finals Rodeo, going into CES, and then going into the Super Bowl, right? You show me any other community that has an eighth of that. Now, you ask a different question, and that is whether these trends that we're seeing in the aggregate economy are part of this. And the answer to that is also yes. I mean, there's no doubt our community has benefited from stimulus. Look, if you look at the stimulus dollars and you think about what their intent was, let's keep the lights on, keep people in their house, right, make sure that there's food on the table. No doubt that's what it did, and those things were important. It also led to record numbers of auto sales and ATV sales and boat sales and big screen TV.
Watches.
Right. All of those type of things also went up overall. So, yes, that is a dynamic we're going to have to shake out. I am of the camp that we were in recession in the early part of this year. Not a recession like the ones that we've seen previously, but there's a pullback because you're taking $5 trillion out of the economy that we put in terms of stimulus. But if you look at these spending trends, number one, GDP is on the way up. It is not on the way down right now. The recent data that we got yesterday in terms of really inflationary conditions have shown some degrees of softness. There's a lot of pressure on households, but right now, look at bank balances, look at after-tax profitability, look at household wealth. Those things are all at or near the highest we've ever seen. And yes, there are some dips down, but we've got time before those start to have a negative impact. It does concern me somewhat that we're starting to see an increase in consumer debt in terms of, as a matter of fact, consumer debt's at the highest level
right, I was going to say, yeah.
But as a percentage of household income, it is not at the highest level we've ever seen. And if I can come all the way back to the beginning of your question, its impact on our industry, most notably some of the locals related activity. If we look at gross gaming revenue from a locals perspective as a percentage of personal income, it has remained relatively stable overall. Personal incomes have risen. Population growth in this community continues to be relatively robust. So if we look at locals' gaming revenue as a function of personal income, it has been pretty stable. So, look, I am also of the camp that sustainability is concerning to me, right? But I am not of the camp that you start to insulate yourself against it and start to make those trades. Not that you don't want to make sure that you have a plan if it starts to fade.
Right.
But right now, I don't think the fundamentals are in a place where it's going to fade.
And it did seem like maybe August, September, I was hearing from other operators of some concern in the numbers, but actually October, November, just the opposite. It's been everyone's back to where they were. So maybe you're right. Maybe it did slow down earlier in the year and come back. But your point of record debt or consumer debt versus as a percentage of household income, no one's ever told me to think of it that way. So that's very interesting perspective to think of it like that. So let's switch gears to sport for a minute. What was your involvement in the Raiders?
Look, I have had a lot of involvement in the Raiders. So back in 2015, there was something called the Southern Nevada Tourism Infrastructure Committee, you may remember. Yep. And this is the one where in March of 2015, Mark Davis comes and says, hey, I want to bring the Raiders here, right? And there's a lot of conversation around that, but my job at that point was to staff that committee, work on developing a financial model that could fund both Allegiant Stadium and an expansion of the convention center. Did that, brought that forward. That committee actually approved that. We drafted legislation and took it to the legislature in October of 2016, if I'm remembering correctly, and essentially got it passed through the legislature. And then I staffed the Southern Nevada the Las Vegas Stadium Authority Board at that point. And so worked with the Stadium Authority Board in negotiating all of the deals with the Raiders, the development agreement, lease agreement, joint use agreement with UNLV. Subsequently left my company for about 7 months, went and worked as the Chief Operations and Analytics Officer for the Raiders, and then came back to Applied Analysis in really about 18 months ago, 20 months ago.
Was that always the plan?
No, that was not always the plan. I had intentionally gone and taken an opportunity that the Raiders, Mark Davis and others, had asked me to come in and take a position. And so I did that for a while and ultimately came back to Applied Analysis.
And is the reason that they engage your firm generally to try to prove the value to the industry and to the state so that they can get public financing? Is that the intent?
Well, look, I mean, in that particular case, no, we weren't engaged by the Raiders at that point, and the Raiders have never asked us to look at the economic impacts. We've often looked at the economic impacts associated with Allegiant Stadium, but that's more around this sort of false narrative. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. This narrative that exists throughout the nation that public money toward stadiums and arenas is a negative thing. There is a reality associated with that. I just don't think that reality exists here in Southern Nevada because of the number of visitors that we get. We were retained to help with doing all of the analytics through the Southern Nevada Tourism Infrastructure Committee. How do we make it work financially so that we can expand the convention center and bring the Raiders here and use less than 1% of room tax? And so we figured out how to get that done. You know, oftentimes from an economic impact standpoint, we do work for many companies from, done it for the UFC for a long time. And it's also around the idea of, being able to demonstrate that these events are just good for communities, whether they're getting public money or whether they're not. Look, we talked a lot about Formula One here today. As of today, they've got nothing in terms of public money and will generate more, respecting the fact that we've talked about, the impact on hotel rooms. The live entertainment tax alone will generate more taxes than any major event in the history of Las Vegas by a huge margin.
You had mentioned 2016 is when you kind of started working with the Raiders. At that point, that was probably the inaugural season of the Golden Knights. Did you have any work with the Golden Knights or any dealings with that arena, or how did that help shape what you did with Allegiant?
At that point, we weren't working for the Raiders. We were working for the Southern Nevada Tourism Infrastructure Committee in terms of what I was trying to do. Yes, we've done some work on on T-Mobile Arena in terms of its economic impacts on the community, right? Today, the single most profitable arena, I believe, anywhere in the United States.
Really?
In terms of what it's generating, in terms of revenue. I shouldn't say profitability because I don't know their profitability, but in terms of volume-related activity, it's unreal. And Allegiant Stadium's doing the same thing. So, yes, we've had some interactions with that. In terms of the Golden Knights, they've reached out a couple of times to ask questions about, visitor spending profiles and some of those type of things. But no, I've never been engaged by our firm. It's never been engaged by Mr. Foley or the Golden Knights to look at the economic implications of the Golden Knights themselves. We have looked more broadly at the economic impacts of sports and entertainment overall, and of course, including the incredible work that they're doing here.
Talk about, you mentioned it, but just for the listener who doesn't understand, what is the room tax? Because I think that's an important piece of this whole city. Frankly.
Sure. Yeah, we have a tax that is imposed upon anyone that stays in any hotel room anywhere in Las Vegas. That is a huge revenue generator for us, more so than anywhere else in the entire United States. And so those dollars go all over the place, right? They fund the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. So the advertising that you see all over the country is funded by that room tax. Some of that money goes to fund Allegiant Stadium today. It funds transportation at the local government. It funds parks and police protection and many other things that local governments do. It also goes to fund our education system here in the Clark County School District, as well as a percentage that goes up to the state that funds schools all over the state. So it is not the only funding source for any of those things, but it is a major funding source for all of those things.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Well, not I agree with you, that's a fact, but it is an important piece of the puzzle here in Vegas. And in terms of looking back on the Raiders and Allegiant Stadium, I think the best quote I ever heard was Steve Wynn said on one of his calls that the Raiders coming to Vegas and Allegiant Stadium is obviously so good for Vegas that it's like a freight train coming through your living room and people can't see it. Looking back on 3 years, would you concur that has materialized?
Yeah, look, I don't know that 3 years is going to be ultimately determinative, but when we were going through the exercise, I made an estimate that about 23% of the people that would be attending events at Allegiant Stadium would be incremental visitors. And what I mean by an incremental visitor is someone who would come to Las Vegas but would not have come otherwise. And I was criticized by economists from Stanford and other places that there's no way that that's possible, that the most that we've ever seen of any stadium that's ever been constructed is somewhere between 3 and 5% of folks coming from out of town. As of last year, Allegiant Stadium thus far has had 53% of the people in those seats that have come, that have been incremental visitation. Things like BTS, Beyonce, Taylor Swift, Raiders football games. Look, I know Mr. Davis would love to have everybody in those stands be Raiders fans, but they're not. They're coming from Pittsburgh, they're coming from Philadelphia, and as much as again, we'd love to have that when I'm sitting in there and it's packed and you're looking at fans from Philly that are there, or maybe Las Vegas fans that are there. Right now it's about a third, and a third. A third Raiders fans that are local, a third Raiders fans that come in from out of town, and a third opposing fans that are coming in to Allegiant Stadium.
I think you're being very generous.
Yeah,
I went to the Steelers game, I went to the Packers game. It was Packers game felt like a Saturday night in Vegas. It was a Monday night, felt like a Saturday night for us in terms of business, and that stadium must have been 50% Packers. At a minimum.
You're right. And look, I'm looking at it overall, right? Obviously, there are some teams that travel better than other teams, right? But look, you know it as well as anybody. Every one of those folks that comes in, they spend about $850 per person per trip, every trip, right? And so you just start doing that math. It matters. It matters to us as a community. And again, with these special events, they are huge for us as a community. Again, we've got to find a better way of making sure that they're shared throughout the community, but they really matter.
Speaking to, you said that about a third of the Raiders fans are coming from out of town, and I assume a lot of that is from Oakland?
No, the Raiders have fans that go way past Oakland, but a fair number of people.
The reason I ask is because, all the news about the A's coming to town.
Sure.
Do we expect to see a lot of people from Oakland kind of traveling here to see the team?
Have you seen how many people go to an Oakland A's game?
Yeah, I guess.
Doesn't matter if they travel.
I guess if all of them came, it still wouldn't do a big number there.
Look, I mean, the brief answer to your question is yes. Look, I mean, Mr. Fisher has made it very, very clear that he really cares about his fan base, and he really cares about the people of Oakland. And that organization spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to figure out how to keep the team there. And I think there's at least a part of it. There's a hope that you maintain as much of that fan base as possible, and maybe you can give the fans that currently live in Oakland a better opportunity to have a better experience by coming to Las Vegas and experiencing a game. That's not going to be for all of them, and I don't mean that to be offensive in any way, shape, or form. But, the experience, I think you have an owner of a baseball team that wants to make an investment, that wants to put a great product on the field. And frankly, he's going to be putting $1.2 billion of his own money into that facility. He better put a great product on the field, or the return on that investment will be very difficult.
Sorry, Jeremy, but just for the person who's listening who may not know much about what the A's are, obviously they're a Major League Baseball team, but what's the story? They're coming to Vegas, they're not coming to Vegas. Where are they in the process now, and where would they go in Vegas? Just back up a little bit for the person who's listening, because I think it is an interesting subject. A lot of people, based on the location that's currently being discussed, that's a high traffic area already. There's a lot of questions about infrastructure. Tell the listener about who the A's are and what the current proposal is. And if you could touch on, and maybe you don't know this, what happened? They were meant to go to Stations and then they ended up at Tropicana, but go ahead.
Sure. All right, so there's kind of a lot there. The Oakland A's are a Major League Baseball franchise. They have been working with the city of Oakland for years, trying to develop a new stadium, as well as some residential development around that stadium. Those negotiations were difficult, like they can be from time to time, and that caused the team to get permission from Major League Baseball to start looking at other markets. They focused on the Las Vegas market. In focusing on the Las Vegas market, they were looking at a number of sites. As a matter of fact, at one point, they had about a half dozen sites that were legitimately
Cashman
under
Field
consideration.
Was one of them.
Right. Cashman Field was among the ones that were at least discussed early on. There was a lot of time and attention around the festival grounds, right? For those that don't know, this is the intersection of Sahara and Las Vegas Boulevard on the southwest corner right there. There's a relatively large parcel. There's a lot of focus over there, a lot of work to see due diligence around that. Ultimately, the gentleman who was selling it, Phil Ruffin, and the A's couldn't come to an agreement relative to that. And so then they started to look at other options. Among those other options was the Stations site that you brought up. We sort of referred to it as the Wild Wild West site, Tropicana, there right off of the I-15, a tremendous site in terms of where that location is, particularly with the improvements that are happening around Tropicana Avenue, for those that are sort of familiar with our community. There became challenges associated with that site, both political and practical, and so they looked at other options.
It was just unusual because they announced it, right?
Well, I think they announced that they would love to do it. And look, I don't think that there was any secret around the fact that when the festival ground site was in there, that there was a lot of momentum toward that. But there's no doubt they wanted to move forward with the Station site. And as you do real estate development, there's due diligence process that you go through. That is a phenomenal site. Someone is going to make that amazing. It just didn't necessarily work for this particular project at this particular time. Okay. And so ultimately they go to the site where the Tropicana is now. I'm assuming most of your listeners know where that is. Mm-hmm. And they have 9 acres. And they negotiated a deal with Sue Kim and the folks at Bally's to essentially build what's a 30-acre plus site. They will have 9 acres of that in sort of the back quadrant that will be a 33,000-seat state-of-the-art baseball stadium. That went through a process at the Nevada State Legislature where the legislature created an incentive package that is valued at about $380 million. I don't think they will get all the way to that $380 million, but it's based on how much revenue that project generates. And the hope is that they will bring the A's here. Now, the next major hurdle in that process is what is happening today, while this is being recorded, is a vote of the owners of Major League Baseball. 75% of them have to approve that the team can move to Las Vegas. So I think there's a lot of optimism around the fact that that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, the next step in the process is a bunch of agreements, the ones that we talked about with the Raiders. Most of them have to be duplicated for the A's, and there's a lot that has to be done to get that on. Like you said, there's real infrastructure challenges, transportation, just the logistics of building a 33,000-seat stadium on 9 acres on the Las Vegas Strip is not an easy thing to do. But I'll tell you, I think, again, full disclosure, we do work for the A's and did throughout the legislative session. But, from an analysis standpoint, building another reason to fill hotel rooms in Las Vegas makes a lot of sense to me. And I think, once again, we'll beat the estimates relative to how many folks come in from out of town, from Oakland and otherwise, to come and see the A's play.
Pretty amazing. Thank you for the backstory as well, because it is definitely a big development for Vegas, and amazing if it happens, how we become basically the sports capital of the world. We went from the entertainment capital of the world to the sports capital of the world in a couple of years. And I think obviously there's a lot of people that deserve a lot of credit. Oscar Goodman was one of the originals talking about sports. Although we didn't get a stadium downtown, I think Vegas being on the map, and obviously it's only a matter of time till MLS and NBA end up in Vegas. I'm not sure if you're working on either of those at this stage. But I think those seem inevitable, and Vegas is like the last frontier, right? It's going to have every sports team soon, and it had nothing 5 years ago.
I don't think we're the last frontier, but I think we are a model for how other communities are going to try and do similar things. You know, the documents, the model that we used for creating the public-private partnership has now been applied in places like Buffalo and Nashville in terms of some of the documents that are there. I think people are learning from the success that Las Vegas has had. But I think we have to take a pause and look at what's working and look at what isn't, and make sure that we don't overreach relative as a community, because I think there are capacity limitations that Las Vegas is going to have to deal with at some point. And look, people have been saying that forever, right? The MGM was too big when it was constructed. Bellagio, no one's going to come to Vegas for luxury, all of those type of things.
Right.
But we need to make sure that there is a balance between that supply and that demand. Interestingly enough, we have 320,000 seats today in major sports and entertainment venues. That is a lot. That is more than any other community in the United States.
As we are speaking, Rich, just let me know that Commissioner Manfred's approved the Oakland A's move to Las Vegas, so it's official. Which you're going to hear this in a couple of weeks, and yes, your work has paid off. Congratulations. The A's will be allegedly moving to Las Vegas once there's a stadium built. But to your point, where the Fontainebleau is about to come online in a couple of weeks. You had Resorts World a couple of years ago. I mean, there's a lot of rooms that need filling at some level. You need all of this.
Yeah, but isn't that just the increased competition that sort of helps all of us? I mean, really, look, there is a element to all of this that is concerning to me relative to the price point associated with entering the market and the yield that can be produced by the assets that are being developed. I think there are real challenges associated with that. And again, this is the comment that I was making before. There are balance issues, and it's not like every project just works because we're Las Vegas. But I have to tell you, when I'm driving down I-15 and I look over and see the Fontainebleau lit up, it was the last symbol that we had of the Great Recession. And for those of us that were around when that happened, when the article was written that Las Vegas was the America's next ghost town in waiting, I will never forget that article, right? That, that's not how it worked out. And, I am bullish on Resorts World. I am bullish on the Fontainebleau. I am bullish on the convention center being a critical asset. I'm bullish on the Las Vegas Loop project connecting those type of things. There are all kinds of things that we need to do, but it is going to take investment and creativity in this community, which, again, coming full circle from where we started, we seem to be looking for reasons to see challenges as opposed to looking for opportunities, and I think we've got to find some balance there.
This tile here in Oscars came from Fontainebleau. As we're sitting here right now, this is the original Fontainebleau tile from 2010 when we took all the furniture out of there, just referring back to the article you said.
It looks great.
When it closed, it still looks good.
Looks good.
Yeah,
looks good.
Still in good shape. I appreciate your optimism and positivity. And the reason I said it's sort of the last frontier and almost to me like the Wild West, it's what attracted me to downtown. It was a blank slate. This whole city and town has evolved so much in the last 15 years that to think what was here in downtown there was no East Fremont, there was no Arts District, there was nothing happening down here. And to me, that's what attracted me to the opportunity, whereas coming from other established cities, there was very little opportunity. And here we're basically building from a blank canvas. And if you look at the population growth and the arenas and the business development here, it seems to me like an endless opportunity of growth and excitement for Las Vegas.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing to that, if that's all right? I think there's an element that you're leaving out in that, and that is that you came and you embraced the city. so much of the dialogue around Formula One and the Raiders and the A's is around community benefits agreements, community benefit plan. What are you doing for the community when you come in and you get on this event, or you have some public money that comes in? I think what also matters is that you and other people that believed in the possibility of downtown got involved in things that didn't always have a necessary nexus or direct benefit to their asset or their facility. They bought in. You embraced this community much like it embraced you. And I think that is going to be the new way of thinking about how this community ultimately is going to be successful, because we went through a period, some folks ascribe it to or attribute it to, probably a better way to say that, to things like private equity coming in and having more of a chilling effect, fewer individual owners like Mr. Adelson and those type of things that just had maybe a different view of the world. I don't think so. I think what we're seeing is a resurgence of the belief that this community's been pretty good to all of us, and we have a responsibility to leave it better than we found it.
You're the best. Thank you for saying that.
Sure.
You seem like you know everything about everything in this town, which is pretty cool to see and to hear. What do you do when you're not doing analysis? Do you ever relax?
Look, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. My work and my hobby are very much the same thing. Look, I have...
It's the best thing you can say.
I have...
It's the best way to live.
Yeah, look, I have a wonderful wife who lets me be me, and I have 2 children that are the absolute center of my world. I'm not going to lie about any of that, but I love what I do. And, the other part is, we've been through a lot. I've been through a lot personally over the last 5 years. And for me, it has given me a new sense of appreciation for what I get to do, the type of projects I get to work on, the people I get to work with, and the people I get to work for. Sometimes I think it's really hard to distinguish between the things that happen to you and the things that happen for you. And as I sit right here and we're having this conversation, I have this amazing level of gratitude for all of those things that I just mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, I have a great life here, and I realize why.
Are there any projects that you're looking forward to over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Some of the sports stuff I've really kind of enjoyed. But I have this question, look, for me, there's no such thing as a victory lap, right? I mean, I'm the guy that's behind the scenes. I should be. Sometimes I'm not, and I think that's when things get a little tricky for me. But more often than not, I'm the guy behind the scenes. That's the way that I designed something to do that. And so the question is, what's that next thing that someone else wants to do? Right. So much of the sports stuff that we're seeing feels like it's successful, right? And I think what you're going to see is some challenges with things like Formula One or the Super Bowl or things like that, but we're going to learn from that. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to develop, and it's going to be good, right? I will hear about it if it doesn't go right, and I'll take whatever responsibility is necessary for that. But beyond that, I'm starting to think about, and have been for a few months, about what comes next, right? I think some of the social programs I mentioned earlier, this homeless facility that I think that really is about prevention and assistance in a different way than we've seen it before, I'm excited about. I had the opportunity to work with Governor Sisolak as well as Senators Woodhouse and Joyce on restructuring the education, the funding system in 2019. We're now talking about accountability measures around that. And frankly, the other one that's hit my radar a lot is healthcare. And really thinking about our healthcare system here. So I'm excited about those things. I realize not as sexy as some of the other stuff that we've talked about here, but the other ones that are obviously on the radar that people are talking a lot about is whether we're going to have a movie studio here and what that could potentially look like. Some of those type of things. So there are some of those sexy things that are out there. Yeah. But, man, I mean, to use a baseball analogy, maybe apropos for today, you hit a lot of singles, and that's what gives you the opportunity to hit a home run.
And you are involved in Opportunity Village as well, right?
I am, yeah.
Because we had Billy Walters on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he is obviously very involved in it as well. It's an amazing program. For anyone listening that isn't familiar with it, please look up Opportunity Village, because something that this community is very much a supporter of.
Yeah, thank you for that. Is Billy Walters not one of the most remarkable people you've ever had the chance to talk to in your entire life?
Unbelievable. His stories are second to none. People around the world have been listening to this and texting me around it and saying, how do you know Billy? And guy's amazing.
The combination of his experience, his stories, and his delivery.
Yeah.
I mean, you just listen to him, and he's just compelling. Amazing human being.
Yeah. Well, Gary, why don't you?
So we always ask all of our guests, and you kind of touched on it a little bit when we were talking about the future and everything. But any advice you would want to give to our listeners who are maybe considering moving to Las Vegas or kind of getting into the industry?
Getting into the industry in terms from an employment standpoint?
Yeah.
I think it could be anything you want.
Yeah,
Give advice to anyone listening.
Yeah, look,
We've touched so much. You can give advice on anything right now.
Yeah. Look, I mean, my advice for folks all over the country is consider Las Vegas as a place to move, but do it with your eyes wide open, right? I mean, this community, my grandfather moved from Cuba, moved here because he could have a better quality of life for the family that he smuggled out of Cuba and wanted to do for them. And I think you can find so many families that have that. You want to find a better way of life, this community will embrace you, but I hope that they need to know that you need to embrace this community too and bring it when you do. From a job standpoint, right, I don't know if some people are looking at the unemployment statistics, not that you want me to get overly wonky. Our unemployment statistics are about 6.1%, higher than most places around the United States. That is a complete fallacy, right? There are reasons for that are technical. I won't go into them, but we are creating more jobs in the state of Nevada than any other state anywhere. There is a huge amount of opportunity here. If you're willing to work, if you're looking for a great place to retire, if you want to get in the industry or industries that support the industry that is here, the American dream still exists in Southern Nevada. I encourage people to take advantage of that.
Beautiful.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining us for On the Corner of Main Street. How would people want to, if they wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way for
Stay in touch, social media, anything?
Yeah, look, I'd love to tell you that I'm on social media, but I'm not.
You're a behind-the-scenes type of guy, so
I'm not. Look, we're at appliedanalysis.com. My name's Jeremy Aguero. Reach out. You have questions. We're always there trying to support. People shouldn't hesitate to reach out to me directly if they'd like to.
Thank you
Jeremy.
again.
Thanks. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and what you all are doing.
Are you a fan of On the Corner of Main Street? You're listening, so we'll assume that's a yes. So share the love, rate, review, and tell a friend to subscribe. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram @PlazaPod, on Facebook, Plaza Podcast, and feel free to write to the man himself @Jonathan Jossel. We'll see you next time, right here on the corner of Main Street.